for us. So stretched out a few requirements from annual to every other year, every 3 years, which was really helpful. I think what becomes challenging from the legislative perspective is the kinds of training. So we want teachers to be trained in safe school climate. We want teachers to be trained in child abuse awareness and prevention.
So
those
it's things
kinds
you
of
can't really argue about.
And I don't know that and so
Yeah, I mean, you want
we've
them.
tried to
Okay.
deliver the training in a way that makes sense. So Chuck was mentioned an arrangement that we've come to with our union to try to give them a day and have them do it asynchronously, so that way we could take time for some other things. And that was a mutually acceptable arrangement. So we carve out a day right before the school year starts. So teachers actually, very few of them I think actually go take the day off. They're in their classrooms doing stuff that's important for them, and then they have to do this other mandated training.
And then how many days of PD are built in the calendar? Can you remind me?
Yeah, so we have six total and 4 across the school year, or maybe 3 across the school year. 3 up front.
But the 3 up front
They're heavily subscribed.
and
3
we
up front are
time to set up their classroom, time,
Meet the
they're
teacher.
not all
the kids aren't
devoted
schooled
solely
yet.
to professional learning.
The 2 things I would like to just point out, Debbie, I think that's really great that you might have the ear of legislators.
Well,
Maybe. Kevin's
Everybody's gonna
right.
listen.
A couple of years ago, a whole group of people got together and streamlined it. But every year, there's new legislation, and I don't know that they go back and they look at the totality. So they'll just add, so they fix it, but they're continuing to add to it. I think anytime they add a new training requirement, they need to go back and look at the totality of training that they're required and make some choices. Because you're right, a couple of years ago it got better, but now every year there's new legislation and more training. And so I think
The
it's
biggest
appropriate.
relief legislatively was not having to do the PMT
Yes.
training with all the staff members, so that physical and psychological management. There was an adopted piece of legislation that would have mandated every staff member participate in that training annually. It's extraordinarily expensive. It's also unnecessary.
What does PMT stand for?
It's
Physical
management
training.
Yeah,
Got
it used to
it.
be physical and psychological management. It's de-escalation techniques if a kid is physically out of control.
Got it.
And how do you do handholds to keep the kids safe and keep others safe.
Got it.
It's intensive and expensive. So that was a huge gift.
Do you know how many hours the state in total requires?
I'd have to go back.
Yeah, so I think there's 18 hours of professional learning that
Required.
doesn't include all of the mandated
Right.
training. The mandated training, I'd have to just look at what each of those topics are.
I can tell you for most people, it takes up that whole full day.
Okay.
Because again, we're on cycles.
Oh yeah, and I think the kinds of training we have to, we're not capturing all of the mandated training in that one day.
Right.
Mhm.
The other thing I just wanted to point out, pulling teachers out of class. I'll admit to this, one of the difficulties that we noticed is that sometimes we weren't paying attention to how many committees people were on. So we would have certain staff members, and we saw this through their attendance records, where they were out a lot, but they were on like 5 or 6 different committees. So we worked with the principals to say, you can't keep putting the same people on these committees that require that they be taken out of class. I mean, I can remember one person,
Oh, yeah,
like
that was
25
3 or 4 years
days
ago.
during the school year,
Extraordinary.
they were out of professional learning, and I was like, you need to manage this, you can't, I know they're great staff members, but they need to be in the classroom.
So committees and training were the same, or committees are yet another
That's
category?
another thing, so we do committee work.
Shouldn't have told me.
But what I'm trying to say, Debbie, is that we started to look at
Yeah.
how often people were out of class. And
Okay,
the
good.
problem that I saw was that some people were doing professional learning and committee work. And we need to look very carefully at what we're asking people to do and how often they're out of the classroom.
Yeah, and I would say, to answer your question, I think we make efforts to limit the amount of times we pull teachers out of class, fully recognizing in addition to professional, where we have
Yeah.
discretion, we really try to limit it, but we're also limited in driving the work forward. where and when and how we can pull people together. So
And I also think by
it's always the
spreading it
balance.
out, it gives a broader net for people to participate in the district.
Right. Well, and I know when it's easy to say, well, we just need more time and we'll add it to the school year for teachers' training. But that has a huge cost.
Yes.
And so, that's the push-pull. So, all right, I will get off my soapbox and I appreciate your patience.
Oh, it's an
But
important
again,
question.
kids coming into school,
Sure.
just seeing their teacher, of course, is the best.
Jack, the two items on the top portion that have significant dollars associated with it but no FTE, the instructional leaders, I assume those are stipends for instructional leaders?
Those are the district level instructional leaders.
District level, sorry. Well, but there's no FTE equivalent associated
No.
with
I
it.
don't think they put
There-
FTE.
No,
we
you
don't
wouldn't
count an
assign
FTE
FTE.
for the IMs.
What?
It'd be
I-
stipends, like stipends.
Well,
on
no,
FTE.
is it a stipend or is it,
It's a stipend.
It's a
yes,
stipend.
okay, so it is a stipend for you.
Yes.
And they appear, the FTE equivalent appears where?
No, there is no FTE equivalent for stipended work.
For any of the stipends that we offer.
What
We
Okay.
don't have FTEs.
No.
All right,
But
well,
it
that's
lists-
what I was asking. Okay, so the instructional leader dollars here are the stipends for instructional leaders, right? Then above that, though, is the certified additional time.
Yep.
And what is
Okay.
that?
That is summertime.
That's all?
Summer
That's
curriculum
the summer
days.
work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Summer
all right.
curriculum work, and I believe
Yeah.
that's one of the numbers that was pulled from the schools to the district over the past
Yes.
few years.
Right.
Okay, yeah, because it shows, it really it begins to really show up in 2019 year, so that's, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
and that was, so as you see those kinds of changes, I think that's again part of our effort to really try to be more strategic in how we're applying dollars.
Yeah, no, that
allocating
makes sense.
time,
I mean, this is
supporting-
where it should, yeah, exactly. Okay,
Right.
all right.
I have a question, going back to the instructional leaders. What exactly does an instructional leader at the district level
So
do?
we have instructional leaders for fine and performing arts, both art and music. We have one for PE.
So it's the same as like this, but they're, at the other schools, they're broken down, like I'm just looking at whatever school I'm looking at right now.
It's kind of district level
Okay.
department versus school level department.
So most of the stipended positions at the building level are team leaders. So they do teamwork.
At
not-
the school level?
At the school level.
Yep.
I believe there may be some special education instructional leaders at the
Yes.
building level. I know at both Cider Mill and Middlebrook, there is a stride person.
Yep.
Yeah. We can give, the list is in the teacher's contract, we
Yes.
can give you the list.
So I was just trying to, and then what's the curriculum coordinators? I was late, I might have missed that.
Trudy and.
Trudy and
Karen
Becky.
Brennan.
Okay, got
They're
it.
K to 8 curriculum coordinators.
I'm just trying to break in my head what a curriculum coordinator versus an instructional leader versus the stipend versus the coaches, what they're all exactly doing.
So your IL and your stipend is the same thing. Your IL is getting paid the stipend, so that would all be one.
They're typically
When you think
full-time
about it.
teachers
Yeah.
in that
Don't
department.
separate
Yeah,
that
yeah.
as to two.
Right.
The easiest way for me to explain it is that the instructional leaders do a lot of administrative type work. The curriculum coordinators work on curriculum. Now, that doesn't mean that instructional leaders don't work on curriculum, but they are not as heavily involved in the curriculum as the curriculum coordinators are. Coaches work directly with teachers on instruction.
Okay.
So did we stop you midway with
No, I-
questions?
No,
You were gonna do year to year or something?
Yes, so I have, I'm kind of deductive in my thinking. I like to go from the general to the specific. Now, we've kind of gotten into the specific, but I have a sheet that my assistant and I use to look at year over year, and I thought it just might be easier for you guys to look at that.
You and Matt, look at this, right? You and Matt.
No, me and Lori.
Lord. Thank you.
There's another extra.
All right, so at the top, what we have here are the two departments, testing and curriculum. And you see it goes from 2017 all the way up to 2021. The top, really the operating budget, and then the bottom chart is with additional time.
What is additional time?
So, time during the summer, when the teachers do curriculum work.
So it's this plus that?
Yes. Well, it's this plus whatever additional time is in here.
Okay.
Maybe I can go through the notes with you. So through the testing office, you'll notice there was an increase in training and conferences, and that was due to Power School training. We are sending everybody for training in Power School, which, do you know what Power School is? So, that's what that was. From my office, the additional time, the curriculum coordinators. So the curriculum coordinators are teachers who work 10 months, but most of our curriculum writing occurs over the summer, so I have to pay additional time for the curriculum coordinators to work over the summer. So that's what that increase was from. There was a minimal increase in training and conferences from my office. I know there was a question from the board about district level increases in professional learning and training, but mine was only $200 of
Right.
that, so.
Okay. I think the principal's highlighted there.
Yeah, so there was one about district level, so I'm not quite sure. I think that might have either been an Andrea or a Fran's budget.
Okay.
Both.
Well,
It's a little in both.
little bit. Contract services, those were just increases due to the two platforms we use to manage both professional learning and teacher evaluation. There was another increase in contract services for the 21-22 school year, and that's because we will be having a follow-up visit from Tri-State. For those of you who don't know, we belong to a consortium of high-performing school districts called Tri-State. They visit on a cycle with us every 2 to 3 years, and there are expenses associated with having them visit us. In 22-23, you'll notice on training and conferences, we have 2 mandated trainings. One is Darkness to Light, that's about sexual abuse prevention, and then we will also have a Tri-State visit there, so there were increased expenses around both.
And the Darkness to Light is state mandated.
We are required to provide sexual abuse prevention training to the staff. Darkness to Light is the particular program we selected to do that.
The Tri-State, how often do they come and how much does it cost? I was in one of those meetings for the Tri-State.
That was probably last year.
So let me kind of explain how a cycle goes. Every 3 years, you're supposed to have a review of a particular subject area. So for instance, I think last year, was the last year? We had they came and reviewed our English language arts curriculum. 2 years from that, they will do a follow-up visit to see what we have done in terms of the recommendations they made that first year. So you'll have it this year, 2 years up, a follow-up visit, and then the year after that, you have to re-review another subject area.
And what's their total cost?
Well, we have to
Broken
pay
down.
for,
The
I think it's about
membership
$5,000.
Okay.
But then there's expenses because people from all over the tri-state
Hotels
come,
and- yeah,
hotels and
yeah.
food and things like that. I think the membership fee is in your budget.
It is, that's 7,000.
Have we broken that down to show data that shows that's helping our schools?
For us, I've only gone through one review. This is only the year after that review, so I wouldn't have data. We're still, I think, trying to implement the recommendations.
Okay.
I don't know whether Tri-State has any data around that.
Not that I'm aware of, I've never seen anything. I serve on the steering committee for Tri-State, and that's just not part of what they do
Yeah,
there.
the commentary from their last visit though was really glowing. It was really, it was just, I think, a fantastic report that we got back from their visit.
Yes. They also offer a lot of very good professional learning that our staff finds to be very helpful.
And many of the staff, you don't only participate when they come to you, we also participate by going out and reviewing others. So it's another way to see what's going on in other high-performing districts in the tri-state area. You know, so if you're interested in kind of looking at their math curriculum review, a group of Wilton folks will go and be a part of the committee reviewing their math program. So you start to see how others are trying to drive higher achievement, and so it cross-pollinates back to, I saw this and it was really interesting, and they have this structure for help, and, you know, so it has benefits on both ends of that.
Is that what Lauren and Trudy went through for the math review this year?
That was New England League of Middle Schools.
But it's a similar kind of idea that getting people out into the world to see what other people do is a strong.
Yeah, it's like a consortium of partner districts.
And I think what's strong also about Tri-State is the fact that they are comparable districts.
Yes.
So when you're going out, it's still the comparable in terms of quality and probably demographics.
Expectation.
Yeah.
And Chuck, where's the consultant from the Teachers College? What's that fee?
That was in the building,
So what line item would that be under?
Training and conference.
training and conference.
They mostly have that under.
That would be Middlebrook's budget.
It would
It's-
be
It wouldn't be
for-
Middlebrook, it'd be
It's
Cider
Cider
Mill
Mill
and
and
Miller
Miller
Driscoll.
Driscoll.
Could we get a breakout of what the cost of TC
Mhm.
training specifically is across the district?
Sure.
I think that was your real
Yeah,
question.
we'd ask, I'd ask about that as well.
I believe some
Yeah.
teachers, they might
Yeah.
have it more, they might have it in two
Yeah,
places.
no, I asked about that
Most of the
sometimes.
time it's falling under like the language arts, but they might have it under two places.
Okay.
So I think it was just a one fee to be a partner school.
Right, and they are associated like
25,000.
substitutes when people go to the calendar days. I can get that information.
Okay. Yeah, and I think at some point, you know, just a robust description, you know, apart from the budget of the work that Tri-State does for us, sort of building on something that you
Teachers
said
College or
earlier.
Tri-State?
Teachers College, I'm sorry.
Teachers College.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we hear a lot about it, and we hear that they're adding this and, you know, looking at phonics and,
Yes.
you know, so they are also evolving, so it would just be interesting to, and even if it's not a huge presentation, it's
Sure.
just a written report.
Absolutely.
Yeah, can do that.
Okay, so one more question about the curriculum coordinators in 10 months.
Yes.
Have we done the cost thing of 10 months plus days versus 12 months to begin with?
We've talked around that quite a bit, and I think it would be probably in our interest to make them at least 11-month employees. So we're looking at a couple of different options, not only the coordinators, but even the Genesis staff. We're talking about modifying their contracts. We have to, they're all in the teachers union, so we have to negotiate an MOU to do that with the teachers union. In terms of the actual dollars, we did start to sketch it out, and I think in terms of what we're paying in additional days would be roughly equivalent to an 11-month employee.
Okay.
And is there benefits to 11-month employees versus 12-month employees, or is it?
The benefit for us is we get the time, you know, and it's built into their contract as opposed to having to finagle extra days, which is far more intermittent.
And do the instructional leaders, they put in the time during the school year, do they also have any days at the
Yeah,
end
they have
of the
additional
year?
days,
They
right.
have additional
Mhm.
days, I think that's important to remember.
Yes.
Yeah, and those are also,
So the
that's
stipend includes some
specified in the
days.
contract. I
Okay.
forget if it's 12 or 14, but they do have a.
Depends upon, there's different types of instructional leaders. Some do 6, some do 9, some do 12, some do 15.
Right, but
Depends upon
yeah,
the
it's
position.
delineated, so that's good, it's not only extra hours after school, it's
Yes.
also
Yeah.
extra days. Okay. Anybody else have questions?
Very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Kick over to
All
special
righty,
services.
everybody take a big deep breath. Where are you on your mood meter? I want you
Get a
nice and bright
cookie.
and yellow. Get a
Go get a
cookie.
cookie, get something sweet.
Okay, so, first, I just wanted to start by saying in some ways, the budget as you see it presented is kind of a baseline. It's gonna be hard to draw perfect comparisons because Anne and Marianne and I and my staff did a lot of looking at how special education was budgeted. We had to move all costs back out to the building. Special ed in prior years was all pulled centrally. So no one ever knew, except us,
Breakdown
where
per building.
everyone was by building, cost by building, cost by cost center by building. So we took this opportunity in the change over to New World to do a very deep dive and go into the budget, make some trials that consolidating some of the lines so that they were more consistent with what we were doing, and then we had to push it out to the building. In New World, there'll be a way to kind of roll that up to look at the total cost of special ed and roll that out. So you could see what is special ed at Miller Driscoll, what does special education look like at Cider Mill. In some ways though, in our kind of hope to tighten up the budget so it was more transparent and understandable to, certainly to the board and to the community at large. I can give you an example. If you look at testing supplies and materials, or supplies and materials, special ed student services, you have special education teachers, speech and language pathologists, OTs and PTs, school psychologists, school social workers. And each of them have their own unique sets of materials, supplies, professional books, professional learning. So we wanted to break it out so that we could see that we're meeting the needs of all of those different, very small groups, as well as the whole in terms of special ed. So it's gonna be hard to do direct cross-line walks this year, but in coming years, I think it'll be a better and more transparent budgeting process in special ed that'll help the community really understand where the money all goes. And it'll become much more clear, both at the building level and then again at the district level. So bear with us through this year, but I think year over year, we're gonna see a lot of improvement in the transparency of special ed. It won't feel like voodoo anymore about where the money goes.
Like a black hole.
Right, so, yeah, you understand the difficulty, right? So, that being said, let me introduce, you have your 3 special ed administrators here, and I thank you so much for the third one, which we added last year, Melissa Barrett, who's our secondary coordinator. She works with Middlebrook and the high school and our community steps program. So we say she's 6 through age 21, okay? And Sharon D'Angelo, who most of you know, she was kind of spread very, very thin until we added Melissa, and now she's really focused on pre-K to grade 5. So she works primarily with Miller Driscoll and Cider Mill, and the Early Learning Center at Miller Driscoll. When I say Miller Driscoll, I see Miller Driscoll as pre-K 2, so that's the way I'm describing it to everybody. So when you hear me say Miller Driscoll, I do add the pre-K in there, okay? And so Sharon has been able to work most exclusively with those 2, and then Sharon and Melissa bridge that elementary to secondary support service. And they provide technical assistance to the buildings, as well as drive kind of our overall program, continuous improvement program, taking a look at where we are, where we're going, and what do we need to get there. Okay, so they've been instrumental in helping to build this, to take a look at where we are, and then they do boots on the ground driving that change at the building level. And I am incredibly grateful, because I think what I'm seeing happen this year, this is my 3rd year in the district, and I will tell you that the momentum we're seeing this year is markedly different because of the boots on the ground at the buildings. We are seeing some of those seeds that we've been planting really move forward much more robustly, because teachers have access to technical assistance. There's a lot of interaction with teachers on the ground day by day. And I think that's a really positive, so thank you for that, and thank you all for supporting that, and I hope you'll continue to do so. In terms of special education, we have 3 areas of focus for this year. and we're adding a fourth for next. So this year, our focus, while we do a lot of things in a lot of areas, the real focus is literacy. Our SEL and social and emotional learning focus, and transition, which in special education, I call it big T transition, which means really that school to life transition. How do we make sure that students with disabilities have equal access to the portrait of the graduate? And so we have an obligation under the laws that govern special education. We have an expanded mandate and responsibilities under the law to make sure that students with disabilities transition adequately to life post-high school. And that is not only in the arena of post-secondary education, but post-secondary education, employment, independent living, and beyond, community participation. So we have an obligation to that for our students across the board with disabilities. Next year, we're going to go deeper and take a deeper dive into mathematics. So now that the mathematics program has gone through its process, and we've been a part of that, and special ed has been a part of that, and you know, from the 61-41 processes, we're focused on closing those achievement gaps. We're gonna take a deeper dive into mathematics in terms of identification of students who may have mathematics-based disabilities, the impact of language-based learning disabilities on mathematics learning. So we're gonna be looking at the diagnostics around that. We're gonna be looking at instructional techniques and methodologies that are going to help drive improvement for our kids with learning disabilities and disabilities. Progress monitoring, how to develop robust, easily implementable, not terribly time-consuming progress monitoring tools that are sensitive to instruction so that we can know lackluster progress quickly and respond. And then making sure that there's alignment between all of those practices and the standards, so that we're not kind of pulling students away from the standards, but we're actually aligned with those standards. So that's the work. That's gonna be a very heavy lift for us over the next few years, but it's something that you'll see, particularly in the professional learning, some of our summer work, some of the work we're pulling teams together to do will be all aligned to those 4 targets and those 4 areas. And all of those areas are focused in on the achievement gap, not just in the gap that we see on the SBA, but really making sure that our young people with disabilities have equal access to the portrait of the graduate as measured by a lot of things, not just the SBA. Okay? So that's the big ticket. In terms of big changes, we're asking for some additional staff in the form of special education teachers. We've done some adjustments in other staffing areas to try to get some more highly trained people. We're asking for 1 at Miller Driscoll. We are asking to maintain the full complement that's currently at Cider Mill. Cider Mill is sending a large class of 5th graders with disabilities to Middlebrook. And so we're asking to maintain their current staffing level rather than reducing a teacher there. And then Middlebrook needs to add teachers, 1.8 from actual to budget, 2.0 from budget to budget. We had to add, we're paying a current teacher, she's actually being paid as a 1.2 this year. We had her pick up a 0.2 because we needed to expand our continuum of services in the area of reading instruction at Middlebrook in the fall. We needed to do that. So we're asking for that. And then the high school, we're asking for an additional, the high school has really received 2 very large classes of more than 60 students with special needs. They are well over 200 students with special needs now, and have not had an infusion of special education staff for the broader group. We did add a teacher for our more complex kids, so we really need to decrease the case management ratios at the high school to to allow not only for the instructional work, but also for the case management work with the kids and with the families.
That would be interesting as part of your presentation. Perhaps you could provide us with the population numbers.
Absolutely.
Okay, to help us understand what's that. I noticed you're going down 5 paras, and since paras are typically one-on-one, does that mean there are 5 less students with para needs, or we're sacrificing something there?
There's both. We adjusted, we don't have the same level of need for the individual one-to-one para.
Okay.
We're also making some decisions about needing people with higher training.
Okay.
Kids
Which-
with more complex needs
So
need
that's the
people who are
teacher.
trained to work with them.
So that drives the 5 teacher increase.
Yes.
So it's not a dollar trade-off, dollar for dollar at all. It's gonna cost us more, that's fine.
The
It's okay.
salary costs more, but the trade-off is the benefits
Yeah.
piece brings it up to, it's not
Yeah.
equal by any
No.
means, but it is,
You know, when I look at the budget requests in dollars per dollars, you add back the differences that are not part of the thing, or take it out one way or the other, whatever you wanna do. It's only about $500,000 year over year
yeah.
on the first page, which is not, in my way of thinking, not 500,000 on 13 million. I mean, it's a lot of money, but well within reason based upon how we see the growth in this category of students. I mean, there's no way around it. It just continues to grow year over year over year. These
Well, the
kids with
prevalence rate
needs.
is increasing here in
Yeah.
Wilton,
Yeah.
and the prevalence rate is
Well, not just in
increasing
Wilton.
at the state level.
Not just, and
The
Darien,
state
and
has gone
Buchanan,
past,
yeah.
15%
Yeah.
of the population is identified with disabilities now.
Yeah.
And that is showing here, we're at about 13.6.
Which is up from where
Which is up.
Yeah, we were at
11.5%
11.5% not that long ago, or so.
Mhm.
You know.
And we
Wow.
were, as an area, we were at 11.5%
Yeah.
for, 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
It wasn't, that was very stable number. It is no longer a stable number. And that's being driven by a number of things.
Well, get the parents to chill, we'd be a lot better off.
I never
That's all right.
judge parents harshly, I
Sorry.
think everybody's trying to do the best
Yeah.
everybody knows how to do on
Yeah.
any given day. I do think we have a mental health issue with our kids that we need to address. And it's landing in the lap of special education to solve in many ways. And we also there are things going on at the legislative level, dyslexia legislation, there's a lot of work being done and lobbying being done, that's driving, unfortunately, most of what happens is that all flows through special ed to help change what's happening in other places, right? So, but it is having an impact on special education as a whole. And I think over the past few years, we've absorbed the increased prevalence rate, and I think part of that speaks to that, I don't even wanna say these 3 letters, but I will, the DMC report, all of that has been absorbed through a lot of our reaction to DMC. But now I think we're coming to a place where we need to realign our staffing. And
Well,
I'm
to
gonna
get
need to
more
do a better
qualified.
job with the community and understanding that a special ed teacher's role is not just instructional. And I don't mean just instructional, like, that would be bad, I'd love it if they were. But there's a whole case management, service coordination piece to their role, that is working directly with parents. And I think that, the time it takes to do that effectively has a direct correlation to the amount of litigation we end up having, honestly.
Well, the change, getting 5 teachers that are qualified and capable and trained, et cetera, really addresses some of the DMC recommendations,
Yeah.
where, as opposed to having someone who doesn't know. I mean,
Yes.
it's not out of line with what DMC
No, it's not.
recommended we do at all, in terms of getting the better quality teacher you get, the better performance you're going to get.
Let me give you an example. We were able to hire this year a teacher at the high school who is she's certified special education teacher who's also cross-endorsed in 7 to 12 mathematics.
Called a unicorn.
She is the unicorn. And she's an excellent teacher.
Yeah.
She's an extraordinary teacher. She could do either or equally flexibly, but she has made a big difference and has had she's been a big part of what you've seen in some of the work that Trudy has presented in helping to align, and I think will have a dramatic impact over time on student achievement in
Well,
mathematics,
that's what
because she
DNC
has
said
a
too.
mathematical mind.
That's clearly what they
Um,
said too.
Right, and I
Yeah.
think there are, you know, looking at what we can do at Miller Driscoll, if we bring in someone with that whole systematic code-based reading instruction, some real strength there, diagnostics, reaction, response, and progress monitoring to those kids who have phonemic and phonological awareness issues in those early grades can make a big difference. We've reallocated and used some of our speech pathologists at Miller Driscoll who are now doing intervention, not just with children with disabilities, but with children who just come in not quite there with phonemic and phonological awareness. We think that's going to pay off in terms of the future of kids being identified and needing specialized instruction, because we're gonna fill those gaps early. So we're realigning and utilizing our current staff, but now's the time where I think it's time to invest in some of our special ed teachers across the district.
I don't disagree.
I wanna talk just for a second about just kind of the net, because we had talked about applying this Project Evolve model. You know, it's this approach where you go down several paraprofessionals to try to offset the cost of a certified staff, and we've applied that model. But it's masked in the numbers because we've also had to add unbudgeted staff. So you just kind of take us through and share an understanding of.
In planning the budget, we went out to the building administration and talked about, you know, what their needs were and different ways we could maybe meet those needs without adding a lot of new money to the district budget. And so we talked about the potential of looking at the numbers of paraprofessionals and whether or not if the principal had the opportunity, would they choose, and we had teachers involved in this conversation too, so it wasn't just the principals, but would they choose to have certified staff? And so many, Miller Driscoll, Cider Mill decided to reduce 2 paraprofessionals to maintain that 1 teacher. Middlebrook is a little different because their enrollment, their issue is enrollment and complexity driven, and then the high school chose to reduce 2 paraprofessionals in order to get another teacher. So, and again, it's not perfect dollar for dollar, but those 2 sets of benefits do make a difference. And, you know, and overall head count, you know, we talk about head count with the Board of Finance. Overall head count, we've chosen to err on the side of trained, certified, qualified staff. And that's not a diss on paraprofessionals, they do yeoman's work, and I appreciate the work they do, but if I have to make hard choices, I have to make hard choices towards certified staff.
Right. And then just last comment on that whole piece. So we had a kid return to us from outplacement, so we added both a certified staff and a paraprofessional in this current budget. Can you just take us through those details as well?
In August, July or August of last year.
The week before school started.
The week before school started. The week before school started. We worked with a family who was interested in considering bringing one of our most complex students back from a very expensive out-of-district placement and into the high school. We have a teacher dedicated to some of our more complex kids at the high school, but this student threw that ratio off, and so we had to split the class. And so we talked about it. We knew he would need some paraprofessional assistance, and we needed another teacher, but we were also bringing back a very large tuition. So we thought, and we hired then, so actual to budget at the high school, or budget to actual is different. We added those 2 staff members in September, and that student is doing extraordinarily well. The students are doing extraordinarily well. But he is, you know, it's been a real win for him and for his family, and I think has really changed a lot for the high school in terms of having the 2 teachers teaming together to meet the needs of a broader range of very complex kids has really added something to the high school and to the continuum of service. So that was a win all around for everyone.
And my last editorial comment is one of the areas that we hold our breath daily on is not ever quite sure who's gonna show up on any given day. So yesterday, Andrea and I were in a conversation, and she informed me that we have 2 students moving into the district, 4 students, excuse me.
2 families are moving in.
Right, 2 of those kiddos were homeschooled by their parents in the Catskill Mountains or something. And so that invoked all kinds of images for me in terms of, you know, levels of readiness and what we might be encountering. But these are the dynamics that, you know, we try to manage.
I also, the other piece you'll see, and I think you'll notice year over year, we're projecting in October for a year from now. Our focus is on building independence, so we may budget for an individual para or someone who might need a high level of care right now, but our hope is at the end of this year, they'll need a less high level of care. So we reassess at the end of the year, post the PPT processes, post looking at the progress monitoring data for all these kids, and we make adjustments to where the FTE goes then. So what we think is going to be here now, we may have 50 some odd paraprofessionals or 40 some odd paraprofessionals, but we place the paraprofessionals where the needs are. So that can adjust across schools in the special ed line at any time during the year as well. So if we have a student who needed assistance who moves out, we don't necessarily, we may not fill a position if a position comes up. So there's a lot of adjustment that happens in the special education domain. We also do tend to have the move-in students that we have no way of knowing yet. So that's always the danger zone, whether it's in the summer or in the middle of a year. You know, having 4 students move in, 2 of whom have pretty significant and complex needs. If you need the staffing, you need the staffing, right? So we may do it in multiple ways, some of it not FTE, some of it might be contract services. For example, if our speech pathologists are maxed out at this time of year, we may call an agency and bring in an hourly speech pathologist for the rest of the year while we figure out how to adjust the FTE for the following year. Does that make sense? So some of the lines you see here, that's the kind of flexibility that we may need based on who the kids actually are when they come in.
Pedro, you were talking about somebody was of 1 FTE and then you made them a 1.2. How does that work in terms of that?
In that particular instance, we needed all of our teachers at Middlebrook were fully scheduled. Their contractual time was done. They were fully scheduled. And we needed an additional class for a group of young people who needed some intensive reading instruction. So what we did was, rather than go out and try to hire a 0.2 person, we put that out to the teachers, and one of our really great skilled reading teachers agreed to add, so she gave up a prep period, and so we're paying her for an additional teaching period. Those things happen at the secondary level. When you have that kind of rigid schedule, you can do that. That doesn't really work at the elementary level.
Yeah, typically a teacher would teach 5 sections.
Right.
And
That
so
would be a 1.0.
would be individual sections, and they teach 6. We see that, that's the high school, you know,
Yeah.
most commonly, the teachers will take an overage.
And I don't love doing that, because that teacher, you know, I like to keep our teachers from burning out, you know, but in this particular instance, this teacher, you know, took that on, but I wouldn't wanna do that in the long term, because I think it puts a heavy burden on the teacher, not to have any time during the day. It does put a heavy burden. Professional learning, again, we plan professional learning for.
Can I just
Oh,
ask
sure.
a staffing question? To the uninitiated, it looks like a tremendous add in staff,
It does.
because you've added 5 teachers, you have reduced 5 paras, and the cost is not, you know, it's much more, it's $300,000 net difference, at least on these lines. So that's a big plus. Plus, we just added a special ed administrator in this year's budget. Plus, we brought in 4 teachers last year for Genesis. So we are investing a huge amount of money in staffing in special ed, huge. And I do see some offsets in here, so I think as we try to put the big picture together, you know, again, we have to ask ourselves, do we need all this at once? And do the offsets make up for some of the expense? And, you know, and the size of the investment in 1 year. It's kind of my question just to special digital learning yesterday was, yes, there's no quarrel with the what. There's the how big a chunk can you do in 1 year financially and in terms of internal capacity. But I also see some offsets here, so I think we should highlight those and talk about them, if there are. And then some of it's where did some of the budget go into the buildings, and some of these offsets are just in the building. It's wishful thinking.
Some of the offsets are in the buildings.
Okay.
And I think if we pull them all together,
Okay.
we also have, there's more offset actual to budget than there is budget to budget. Does that make sense?
It does.
Budget from last year to now shows less of an offset than what is actual to now. So, yeah, we'll work on pulling together a sheet that shows that. It is not perfect. There is some new money, but it's far less new money.
And again,
than-
I'm not trying to be unreasonable, but I
No,
also
I
need to
understand.
step back and be
I
able to
do.
say, wait a minute, somebody's gonna add up the 4 Genesis teachers and the 5 teachers and the 1 administrator, they're gonna say, so you've added what?
Right.
And yes, you've lost parents, which is great, that's a wonderful move in the right direction, but is it enough of a move? And what's our kid enrollment, because here it's showing we're going down 15 kids, year to year in special ed, is that accurate? You know, where are the need categories, all of this sort of stuff, and then and I do think there's wonderful news about Genesis, so I'm not trying to trash anything, I'm just trying to
I absolutely understand.
I'm just looking at numbers right now, and I'm sorry to be so harsh.
The other thing I'd like to, that we need to help clarify for the community and for everybody else is that Genesis is not a special education program. I know in some ways I'm the voice of Genesis, so it starts to look like it's special ed. It's not a special, we have, it's not, right now we're about 80% students with disabilities, but over time I'm hoping that number will become more about 60-40. And so it's not solely special education. We accept all students into Genesis. It's not a program designed solely to meet the needs of students with disabilities.
Right, but a big rationale for it was to offset
Sure.
Tuition.
out of district tuition, which by definition is special ed. So it's been heavily tied.
Yeah.
And that's not to say we should exclude non-special ed
Right.
kids or not try
I
to
understand.
attract them.
Yeah, I
But a
understand.
big cell was definitely connected to special ed.
Is the decrease in contracted services, which is significant, the result of adding the qualified teachers? Or what's driving the big decrease in contracted services? It's $500,000.
It's never a one-to-one.
Okay.
So there are multiple factors that are helping us do that. Yes, having more highly trained, more qualified staff in the jobs they need to be in and doing the work they need to
Well, I'm
be
trying to
doing
help you.
is a piece of that puzzle,
Yeah, I'm trying to help
right?
you get the answer to her question.
We've moved to a number of, we're actually trying to train and expand, the ability of those teachers to have impact on their colleagues as well and not just being great teachers themselves.
All right.
So I think that's a piece of the
Yeah,
puzzle.
and I assume that.
We also have a number of students who are toward the very upper end of their time in Wilton, who have had, these are kind of legacy services that as they age out,
Okay.
those students no longer need, and so we capture back that funding.
Okay.
And because
Understood.
we've worked on increasing the capacity
Okay.
of our own teachers, we don't need, the students, the same student with the same
Right.
profile can be met by our staffs at the
Versus-
building versus bringing in consulting. But once a service is, once a service like that is on a student's IEP, it's
Is there-
challenging to remove.
to get it off. Is there an opportunity to make tough to say, it's always a tough decision, do I go out and contract for a service, or do I bring it in-house and pay for it? Now, my common sense says, you would pay less if you bring it in-house as opposed to going out and contracting for it. So the $1.3 million that's still there is a lot of money.
Mhm.
Could we offset some of that by bringing more expertise in-house and reduce that even further and have it in-house that we could manage and would be, target our needs more? I don't know, it's just a question for you to look at. And some,
The bulk of that,
Yeah.
you know, the big ticket
in
within
contracted
that
services.
budget is a contract we have with the Connecticut Center for Children with Special Needs.
Okay.
And they provide our clinical supervision of our students with the most complex needs up to and including autism.
Okay.
So our very most complex kids.
Okay, so that's
Um,
expertise that we probably wouldn't wanna bring in-house.
It's not that we wouldn't wanna bring it in-house, but it's an expertise that is, it's very specialized.
Okay.
And, you know, we're looking, our program, we have boots on the ground that are at one level. We also have a doctoral level board certified behavior analyst who does, when I say clinical supervision, they're making sure that our program is tightly aligned with science.
Okay.
And one of the things you find in a program like that, it's called treatment drift. And so those folks are there to prevent treatment drift.
Well, it's just a question for you
Mhm.
to make that,
Yeah.
that call. I mean, we
I
have
think
to
about that all the time.
constantly evaluate, are we better served by not having contracted costs, bringing that cost in-house, typically which would be less? Or does it really meet all our needs and we'll stay this way? So I mean, that's just a question for you to,
I
I'm
can
sure
show, you know, I'll show you
Yeah.
a way in here, part of the professional learning, one of the things I'm proposing for next year is to have 3 of our school psychologists, do a year-long micro certification in neuropsychology, school neuropsychology. That will increase our capacity to do that deep dive of an evaluation. And over time will save us some funding in terms of our outsourcing for neuropsychological evaluations. That's something that I think our staff would have the capacity to do, and I'd love to see us really get very
Good.
robust in
Yeah.
that. It's costly, it costs about $10,000 a person to do it, but I think it's worth,
Eval costs.
each eval can
Yes.
cost $10,000.
Yeah.
So, it can pay for itself rather easily, so that's a way we
An
would increase
evaluation
capacity.
costs $10,000.
Oh, yeah,
Easy.
easy,
It's
easily.
crazy.
Wow.
Andrea, what is the ESI, ESY?
Extended school year services.
Summer school.
My favorite.
Don't say that to
Andrea,
yeah.
No one, I really don't wanna say that on TV. Yeah,
It's been
ESY is
over.
extended school year services. The law requires that at each annual review, we consider whether a student requires extended school year services as a function of a free and appropriate public education. These guys, along with Bernadette Hess, have done a tremendous job over the past couple of years really tightening those services. And I think if we did an analysis, and I'm happy to do it,
Half of what it
it's-
was 5 years ago, 6
it's
years ago.
decreasing in its cost. And, you know, in the land of do more for less, it's a better program, a much better program. In terms of really driving the instructional needs of the kids. We have a parent group that, we're working with, and I think the parents are, happier with the program, so it's costing less and actually doing more. So we're really pleased with that. That's an area where we're trying to, and I think it might be a good area to show how we have made some decisions. It's not, special ed is never gonna be free.
Oh, no,
But I
no,
think we
no, of
can
course
do a
not.
lot of things to tighten up how we do spend our money and making sure that it goes to the most impactful and powerful things.
And when you were talking about litigation, is that under the contractual services legal fees?
Yes.
Well, legal fees, but, the litigation kinds of things in special education, have a wide variety of, it's not all in court
Right, that
necessarily,
seems
there
small
are
to me. So there's-
mediations.
Right.
You also benefit, you know, not to toot my own horn, but I can do a lot of legal stuff myself.
Yeah.
I've been doing this a long time. I should get an honorary legal degree. We do have attorneys that we use and we, use in lots of ways, but, at the end of the day, I do a fair amount of that kind of legal work.
Yeah, that's another number that's come
Yeah,
5
yeah.
years. So even on the, kind of the non-specty,
Yeah.
that's leveled off.
Again, I think it
It's gonna
speaks
be
to
larger
have,
issue.
making sure our staff are continually working in partnership with families and giving our teachers some time to do that case management and service coordination, and bringing the family into the process as a way to diminish litigation.
What line number is that?
I can tell you, it is, I'm learning my line numbers very quickly. It is under 8900-46030. And,
Middle of the page. Oh, there it is, I see it.
question about in-district, out-of-district, when Chuck was mentioning, not to single on one child, the Syrian child, so like when we,
Same question.
when we are taking children out of, how do you, well, two questions. Number one is, for that example, based on the foundation that I am paying for my children's education because I'm a taxpayer, who is paying for that, for the education when we bring children in, for example, from Syria?
But they live here.
They
live
live
here.
here.
So are they paying, they're
Yeah.
paying taxes?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
residents.
They're
Okay.
residents.
And so then, when we make a decision to send the children to other
So
schools,
just, I wanna, if they're renting or
Yeah, right, I was
buying,
gonna say that.
right, that would be the difference between what they're paying in taxes, but if they live in town and the kids,
Yeah, if they're town
Heads are
residents,
on
they go,
pillows.
right.
they're
Okay.
ours,
okay,
right?
then how do you make the determination, how do you, guess I'm trying to ask, how do you determine that something's gonna go up or down? Is that just because of fluctuation of the children so much? Like, when you're looking at costs of out-of-district, cost of transportation, how do you look at it and say it's gonna go up 13% over next year?
That population you have.
It's just an estimate based on.
Well, I know who we,
Contract.
I
I was
know
gonna
who we
say
have
contract.
now,
That's
Right.
still excess
Right.
cost.
so we know who we have now.
Right,
So the first, to begin the budgeting process, what I look at are all the students who are currently outplaced. And I look at things like, how long have they been in that outplacement? I look at
Just the
what are the
pattern.
needs of the students.
yeah,
I look at whether or not there has been improvement year over year that's driving potentially a look to come back.
so we do have the option, and you're looking at that yearly, the potential to come back.
Oh, always.
Okay.
I think students are better served in their community than they
Yeah.
are outside their community as a belief system.
And I think parents would
Um,
probably want them to be home, I mean, right?
Well, not
Some
always.
yes,
Yeah,
some
some
no.
yes and some no.
I'd like to think so.
All right.
Can you do 2 minutes on excess cost?
Yes, the excess cost provision, there's a provision in state statute, that allows for, the language in the law is, to get, for communities, to get reimbursement for the catastrophic costs of special education on an individual basis. And the formula is, the district, the local education agency, which is Wilton in this case, is responsible for 4.5 times the per pupil expenditure of the district. So Wilton is about $22,000 roughly.
4.5 times.
So 4.5 times, that's Wilton's ticket.
And then after that, the state.
That's the deductible.
After that, the state reimburses what amounts to, we plan for about 75%,
Yeah.
or 75 cents on the dollar for every dollar over that 4.5 times the per pupil expenditure. And so that gets reimbursed back in to help with the costs of kids who have those needs. Now, one of the things we've been doing, which has helped tremendously over the past couple of years, is we're tracking not only the costs of students for tuition and transportation out, but we have students whose programs in district exceed that, even if by a small amount. And we're capturing every single penny of excess cost. And that's helped us in the tuition line, that's helped us in, the consultation lines, that's helped us as well.
So, how do we account for ECR money? Is it anywhere in here or in prior history,
Or
is it
you're not
in here?
asking for it?
We'll reduce the budget, cause as you know, we can't budget for it, so we take that estimation of what we think at 75% and reduce one of the line items because the cost is spread over so many different line items. It's difficult to figure out in what line items do those costs reside. So at the end of the day, right now, you would be over budget. If you had everything budgeted the way the expense related to that child is, you'd be over budget in all those line items, and then the revenue sits in the town side.
How is it over multiple line items? Why wouldn't it be over like the transportation and the tuition?
If you had, sorry, I didn't
I
mean.
mean,
For
Is it-
example,
is it
if we,
in here?
for an in-district
District.
student, you might have the salary, partial salary of 2 or 3 paraprofessionals.
Mhm.
Because we try to rotate paraprofessionals through the students during the day to help flexibility. You might have a portion of a speech pathologist, a portion of an OT, a portion of a PT, a portion of transportation, because they're not alone on the bus, a portion of a bus aide. And so if you really wanted to lay it out, it'd be all over the place. It would
Okay.
be very hard to map against. So what we do is we reduce the funding in tuition, consultation, some of the bigger ticket items, to account for the excess cost reimbursement. We don't refund the speech and language pathologist, that we pay for the speech pathologist. Does that make
Yeah.
any sense?
So we lower the line, we go over, and then the excess
Reimburse
cost
the
comes
line
in
with
and
excess
Net,
nets it
so
out.
at the end of every year, if you were to look at our budget at the end of every year, we'd actually over budget by the excess cost.
Right, and that shows
And then that
in the
nets together,
actuals.
and that shows, in the actuals, you'll see that if you look at any historical budgets versus actual, you'll always be off that 1 million, whatever the range, 1,600,000.
So
And
the
that's,
actual in 2018-19 is 4.7 million for tuition out of private. And that includes the special ed, no, includes our actual spend.
spend, which we would have reduced in the budget to offset for a
But we
exit.
got that money to cover it?
Yes, yes. I look every,
You'll see it at the next,
February
when,
and May.
you get the costs right now. There are some accounts, like the tuition account, which is deeply in the red. And yet Ann and I are calm as cucumbers,
Yeah, I know.
because we know what's coming back to us. We're not ripping our hair out, we're not, wringing our hands, and nor should you, because that's where the excess cost will go.
So when you say you propose next year's budget, or even this year's budget, you propose for 19-20, it'd be 3,153. But you're really expecting it's gonna be 4,153.
Likely, yeah. Yes.
And that not that the tuition itself will be that much, but the overage, so you're comfortable when that line starts to, all right.
And for this year,
Yeah, for this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, all right, so then the issue is, okay, so when you,
Compare history.
when you propose in next year's budget, it's gonna go down, and that we think is good news, but you're still thinking it's gonna go be over that amount.
Well,
It's
it
still
will
gonna
be.
be over that amount,
Yeah,
because we
yeah.
always,
But the reduction is real.
the reduction is
That's what
real
I
money.
wanted.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
applied excess cost to both those numbers, the difference is what
It's
we're
gonna
expecting
still-
to save.
That's it,
Right.
okay, all right, just need to kinda
Yeah.
keep that
Mhm.
straight, which is hard.
Trust me, it's hard, but,
Yeah,
So
and I'm
the
not quite
reduction,
used
that
to
what you're
it this way.
seeing as a
Okay.
reduction is
And it's all
real.
in this line.
Yeah,
But
this is a
But
bigger
then
line to take, and it's cleaner for us to track.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not
Yeah.
quarreling with that, I'm
Yeah.
just saying it's all anticipated here.
Right.
Yeah.
The
And this
savings
number
right
is
now
the
there.
actual net real number is here. We run over against this number
But
throughout
it's-
the course of the year, but at the end of the year, it comes back to the budgeted number.
No, that's the difference. The
Actually,
budget, we don't budget for excess cost. So
No,
at
I
the
know.
end, so at the
Yeah.
end of the year, if we budgeted 3 million,
Yeah.
we would and we get reimbursement of 1.6, our actuals would be 4.6. So you would see that difference between your budget to actual of $1.6 million if it was all.
Well, yeah, that's
So
basically
if
what
you
I'm
look
saying.
at-
Oh, I'm
you would-
sorry,
you would
I
see that
misunderstood.
Yeah, no. Yeah, this is gonna be the net
Budget.
number. The budget
Yes,
number is gonna be
yes.
the net number after
Yes.
reimbursement.
Yes.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Sorry.
So we'll run over that significantly during the course of the year, month by month, by the end of the year, it'll come back to this number.
Right, my staff and I
To the
focus
budget
in
number.
on, we look
Yes,
at all of
on our
our
page.
high-cost kids.
I
We
just wanna make sure
anticipate-
Because look, it's still
I just
return.
want, on
That
paper it
4.7
won't.
isn't gonna change.
It will come back net, but if someone looked at it and I say right now it'll come back, it won't be back down to 3 million, it'll be 4.6 in expenditures, in actuals.
Yeah, see,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just wanna make
Okay.
sure
Still our
I'm
kids
explaining
that are
this
getting-
right.
Well, why
Alright,
don't
so
we get the
if you
benefit then?
see
Where
this
the town gets the
actual-
benefit. The town takes
doesn't
money.
understand that.
Huh?
The town, we get the benefit.
Yeah, the town gets
So
the benefit.
in the
Okay.
CAFR, when you see the CAFR, you'll see it back to budget.
Yeah. Town gets the
Well, that's
benefit.
why I was asking.
Yeah.
Where is it?
Okay.
Okay,
Here,
s-
are you guys in
we
16?
All right.
It's been a really long time.
Yeah, because then in the actual, at some
I
point, you have a
think it'll
revenue line
become
that just went up.
clearer. What I'll do is I'll put together some simulations about excess costs so you can see how
Yeah.
how it works. It looks like a high fog issue, but it's not. It's really, we focus in on making sure we're budgeting appropriately. The savings you see in tuition is real, and that's both an increased capacity and a Genesis issue, both. We have fewer students going out. I will say the ones going out are needing a higher level of care. We've had a couple of residential placements recently. So that's an even higher cost, but with excess cost, you get reimbursed after that 4.5 time. So it does help with something where you're talking about a $250,000 a year tuition.
Right.
Keeps it from being a budget buster. That's what.
So if I get upset over one page where you're going, oh, salaries look like it's a $300,000 net, turn the page, this is important, so then turn the page, those consultant prices are real, and the tuition is real.
Yes.
All right, so this is, I just have to put it together for the public.
Yes. That is, they're real savings, but I would, it's a reinvestment in keeping Wilton kids in Wilton.
Yeah, no, I'm not, again, it just right now.
I know
just
you're
doing
not
numbers.
arguing with it, it is a reinvestment, it's not, so that's part of the offset.
Yeah, it's an offset. Yeah, no, I'm not saying it's a savings, I'm saying it's an offset.
Yep.
So no one has heart failure.
Which they still will.
I mean, they still might, but
Hopefully not
anyway, no,
heart
it's
failure.
important to realize, to put them together and, so see it. It's still a tremendous amount in staffing, and tuition is coming down significantly, and the need for outside services is coming down significantly.
And I think with some of the additions, we might actually be able to see even more.
Right. Can I ask you a quick question about digital resources?
Yes.
What's the big jump?
The big jump is we moved to one of our assessment suites, which I think this will also show some savings over the next couple of years. We moved to the digital assessment Pearson library. So our psychologists, special ed teachers, and speech pathologists are now using a digital assessment library to do some of their standard work. And so we had to pay, that'll be now a subscription that we annually cover, but we're gonna see some offsetting savings, not this year, because we had to do some early investment, but in the next couple of years, you're gonna see some savings in terms of paper and pencil protocols. We'll also see some long-term savings, because when a new test kit, test kits can cost $500, $1,000, $1,200, and they go into revision. I look at you because you know what I'm talking about. Right, they go into revision and you have to reinvest. You have 1 year to reinvest in the testing kit. With the digital assessment library, there will be no cost back to the district. It'll just appear. Yes, come see them. They're really kind of fun. We do it on 2 iPads, Bluetooth together. And we're seeing, one of the things we're starting to see, we just implemented. We did this in Fairfield, so I know what's gonna happen, but we're seeing it here and people are starting to see it. The kids, because they're so device driven, we're getting what we think are far more valid results to the testing, because they're using the device in their responses. And it's saving school psychologists, they're saving time in their testing, so less time in testing means more time in direct service to kids. So there's a lot of good benefit to it. And if you ever wanna come see what it looks like, come on, it's cool stuff.
So when they upgrade, there's not like a licensing fee?
Nope.
How did they get?
The WISC 5 is there now. If the WISC 6 comes out, it'll appear on their iPads. It's a smooth transition with no cost.
But the cost of the digital, did you
It's
buy a
an
multi-year
annual-
license?
It's an annual subscription.
Right.
But the kit is encompassed in the digital platform, so you don't have to buy a new kit.
Right, but we might imagine the cost of the kit 3% a year or something like that.
The subscription.
Subscription,
The
yeah.
subscription
Sorry,
is,
cost of the subscription, excuse me.
The subscription is based on the number of students we have in special education.
Okay,
So that number will be stable and projectable,
got it.
so that we can budget for it accurately. It's a money saver.
Yeah, that's great news.
Mhm.
Good
And
job.
it's a time saver and we get better results, so, it's a win-win.
I feel we haven't asked Melissa or shared anything, so, just from your vantage point at the building levels, we heard a terrific overview, from Andrea. And I've asked this of other principals as well, is there something that is like a burning need that is not reflected here? Are you hobbled in any way? Is this budget sort of gonna do
No.
what you think it needs to do? Maybe not all that you
Right,
want it
right.
to do, but.
I really think the increase in special ed teachers, and while they will be special ed teachers in FTE world, I think we as a district have made a goal to close the achievement gap. And in order to close the achievement gap for our high needs population, they need to be exposed to the curriculum. And to expose them to the curriculum, we need to provide supports within the gen ed setting. And it's very difficult to provide those supports without the adequate amount of FTE. Because what we wind up doing then is having classes that are not equitable in how they're split up with identified and non-identified students, which becomes a drain for a lot of reasons. And I think we've made a lot of great work with some of the curriculum coordinators and the teachers to really look at multiple means of access to the curriculum and how we can really do it in the classroom, but to put kind of all of that into real time, we need the staff to implement it properly. So that's where I kind of have all of my eggs and hopes in that basket, because the kids aren't exposed to the curriculum, trying to close the achievement gap it's not gonna happen.
I think for the early elementary, the staff that we reflected, the addition in our conversations revolve mostly around literacy. And what we know of literacy is that we need to provide small group intensive instruction. And what happens with our students and our case numbers are larger. Cider Mill, for example, average around 18, 19, 20 kids per case manager. That becomes less and less likely to be able to happen realistically in the course of the day. So with a reduction in paraprofessional support and an increase in certified staff, our hope and our aim for next year is to make sure that our reading intervention strategy groups are nice and small, and that we're able to reach the kids earlier and more intensely and get the reading going. So I'm really excited about that piece of it. I think it's what we've been talking about for the last 3 or 4 years. And so that's where, we're really hoping to see a change in that. Once we get them in K2 and we get that going, we're hoping by 3-5 we don't need it as much. When we hand them off and they're learning in the classroom,
Right.
they're good to go for reading.
Sharon, can you talk about that additional member who's staying, or Andrea, at Cider Mill, now that that large 5th grade class is moving out?
Yeah.
Can you talk about the thought process behind not having that person move to Middlebrook, instead hiring additional 1.8 at Middlebrook? It's almost like you're hiring another person by not moving that, right?
Well, it
In theory.
gives Cider Mill the same boost we're trying to give the other 3 buildings without adding another FTE, because we could, they gave us back 2 paras and we're letting them keep that teacher. Otherwise, we'd leave the 2 paras and reduce a teacher and move them to Middlebrook. That's how we would typically account for a large class moving up, we'd move resources with that class.
But will that number go down when you said the typical one has 18 to 20 students? Will that number go down now that a lot of
Cider
them-
Yes.
Mill's
Yes.
number will come, their average caseload will come down
Right,
because they're keeping that teacher.
right.
Middlebrooks will also go down because of that.
You're adding 1.8.
We're adding 1.0 for the boost, and we're adding the 0.8 for student need of that large 5th grade, or the 1.0, for that 5th grade
If
coming
you
up.
take the difference between the 2 caseloads, it should bring them down to a more typical caseload, which would be between 12 and 15 kids next year, which allows them to be doing their services in small groups and flexibly along the course of the school day. Whereas right now, they're sort of behind the 8 ball, trying to make sure that they're getting all the kids in, and so the group size might be larger, and they struggle with the amount of testing. And always, with the reduction of case management, comes a reduction in the amount of meetings they have to attend, which equates the amount of time away from their kids.
Yep.
And so that's, I can't emphasize enough how huge that is. When we're talking about time with kids versus time away from kids, having 10 less meetings a year gives them back hours of instruction time.
And now, when you were mentioning intervention, like reading intervention, math intervention, that's on a different line item versus the special
Right,
needs.
this is special education.
Yes.
Intervention,
Yeah.
okay, just wanna clarify.
Is there a standard, is not a professional industry standard on caseloads, or is it really all about the kids and what their,
Service
the
hours.
severity of the
I mean,
needs
the
are?
service hours and the IEP kind of drive some of the instructional time, but I mean, the caseload size with what we hope for an increase, I mean, our high school caseloads are between 18 and 25 kids. So the case management responsibilities around that, when you think of meetings and things, are huge. So looking to have that increase so those students can spend, the teachers can spend more time in the classroom.
And we've been.
Professional organizations like the school psychologists, speech pathologists, they will give some caseload guidance. And we're well within that guidance, and we're in it. We're not highly overstaffed, we're in it.
No, we were talking about counselor ratios
Count-
yesterday,
right.
and there's kind of
Right.
an understanding that 200 is about, give or take a little bit. But my guess is in special ed, it's a little more difficult. And service hours, I guess, is the way to look at it. Is there a service hour?
And the
kind of
complexity of student.
Sure.
Right.
So, a student who has an articulation disorder needs less time and energy than a student who might have an apraxia, right? I just throw out those fancy words just for fun. But, so a milder disorder requires less time, less intensity. You could do some group intervention.
Sure.
The more intense the need, the smaller the group size, the more highly trained the teachers need to be, the more
Well,
complex.
And I also know that 3-letter report that no one wants to.
Yeah,
That shall not be, shall not be named. Talked about the number of meetings and more efficient
Yes.
meetings and all of that, and that is not something that happens overnight. And it's
We're
ideal,
making-
but is it, do you see a?
Oh,
Yeah,
it's in,
how
it's
does
in the
it
sped
improve
report.
the-
Yeah, we
We've come
put it-
down,
yeah.
I think,
Oh,
hundreds
significantly,
over
yeah.
3 years, just the number of PPTs.
Which has really, one of the
Or
things
just
that's
the number of
helped us
meetings,
do.
not even the length of meeting?
I
is
mean, the
it's
length
allowed
they've,
our
The
staff
length,
has
yeah.
come way down too.
And they're
to
absolutely
be
right,
with
it's not
their
reflected in
students
that
more,
report.
No.
Sure.
which I think is
Yeah. Oh,
also
yeah.
teachers with kids, that's what makes a difference in terms of achievement. But our speech and language pathology, we're not asking for more, even though we have more kids with needs, they're absorbing that. They're doing some early intervention at Miller Driscoll, particularly with kids who haven't been identified, to prevent identification. So we're utilizing the staff in all of those ways. Our school psychologists, because they're not always in PPTs or always testing new students, they're able to do intervention with kids in the social and emotional and behavioral domain who aren't necessarily in special education. So we're those resources are pushing more toward the student. And I think they're more available to families to discuss concerns, to engage in those kinds of conversations. And frankly, having them work with our general ed teachers to help support the UDL kinds of things, to help when a student is really struggling and you've done everything you know how to do, just having another set of eyes who looks at things differently, as special ed teachers do, or speech pathologists or OTs or PTs, can just start a whole new conversation and drive improvement. So those different perspectives are healthy to the problem-solving process. So we are responding in many ways to that report, and we're seeing the benefit on the side of all the things you're noticing, the outplacements, the litigation issues, all of those things are in direct response to how we're reutilizing what we have for staff, and now we just think we need a little boost in one more arena.
Cool. Can I just ask you one more question? You guys have both mentioned literacy. Do you guys know how many of our students have either left our district because they didn't feel like they were getting what they needed and they were diagnosed with dyslexia, or how many we are paying to go out of district?
Well, I can't say I have 100%, because I don't know, sometimes parents who take their kids out to go to private school don't necessarily tell us.
Yep.
I do know about the parents who have gone unilaterally place their students in schools outside and come back through the due process or mediation process. I have those numbers. I know how many students are placed in out-of-district placements by a PPT team because we couldn't meet their needs in terms of literacy. That's not a large number in the leagues. So I can give you some factors around that, but I won't say it's a perfect. There might be people who've just said, you know what, I'm going somewhere else because I like the way they do it better, and didn't inform the district that that was the reason they were leaving.
Okay.
But I can give you some information on that.
I guess partly my question too is, does it make sense, I know there's been so much in our district about literacy and whatnot, but does it make more sense to have somebody who, and maybe we do, like really focuses on this area instead of having to outplace some of these kids? Like financially, does that make more sense, and is it something that we've all looked at as a district?
Do you mean bringing in like some kind of literacy specialist? I'm not sure what you're
Something, I don't know what, or
Well,
training all of our
in the year,
teachers?
well, we have,
in a
let
certain
me
way?
tell you what, we have done a lot of training, and we've trained upwards of, I think, 60 people in systematic code-based reading instruction, Orton Gillingham, which is it's very costly both in terms of time and clinical supervision, a coach who coaches the teacher. We have a large number of teachers, special ed, some of our interventionists, some general ed teachers have all chosen to do either the classroom educator, which is 30 hours plus 30 hours of coaching, or the next level is an additional 30 hours, so 60 hours of in-class plus 60 hours of coaching. And we have a small number who are interested in going forward toward what's called the Orton Gillingham Fellow.
This is for diagnosing literacy issues?
Diagnosis and intervention, yeah. Not that Orton Gillingham is the only answer, it's a piece of the puzzle, it's a piece of it. So we are moving in that direction in lots of ways. The other piece that I think I'll probably come back to you at some day for, is to look at the idea of a coaching model to help not necessarily just the special education teachers, but the gen ed teachers.
I think that's what I hear the most about. Like
Yeah.
They just don't feel like they can keep up or teach the kids in a certain way to help them, and maybe it's not our special ed teachers. You're right. It's our gen ed teachers that are kind of feeling the gap and the loss, and that's what I was curious about.
Yeah. So I think that will be, once we have enough boots on the ground doing direct service to kids, then it'll be about making sure we maintain the strength, quality, and as we onboard new teachers in particular, teachers don't come out of their pre-service training ready to do this work. They need a lot of support in those early years, their first 5, 6, 7 years of teaching. They need a lot of support to meet the needs of a broad array of kids. And so at some point down the line, you may hear me come back with some ideas about that. Right now, we need boots on the ground.
Well, part of the question is more of a general ed question than like the literacy coaches and the writers workshop model. So what's the gap that you're talking about?
I think it's trying to be able to teach to those kids that don't learn based on those models, right? And trying to identify, there's a certain group of kids that we miss because they learn a certain way, and we're training our teachers to maybe teach one way when we've got this group of students that need to learn this way.
So one of the
There's
things.
an intervention
Yes,
role
so-
as well, so do any of that get at what
Yeah, so
Jen
one
is
of the things
asking
that
about?
we can share is that Abby Searfoss is a special ed teacher at Cider Mill, and she actually went to some training down at Teachers College in how to take the workshop model and adapt it for students who have special needs. And I think it was an eye-opener for a lot of us.
It was a great meeting.
It was a great meeting, and we're even seeing some carryover into math. So I think it's specialized training in how to take a framework for doing literacy and individualizing it and providing the right accommodations and modifications for students with unique learning profiles in the general ed classroom.
Chuck, when you said it was an eye-opener, can you give some examples of things that kind of cause people to go, aha?
Well, I think for Abby and some of the people who went to that, it was how do we take a mini lesson and make it meaningful for a student who may be 2 to 3 grade levels below that particular grade level class. And so what I remember seeing was that she had charts about every component of comprehensive literacy and how you could make accommodations and modifications depending upon the needs of the kids. Remember, we're not just talking about kids with dyslexia. There are children with autism, there are children with intellectual disabilities. And so, you know, you have to think through what are the needs of the student, what are the demands of the task, and how can we make those accommodations.
Some of the
And I
things-
think that's probably what you're hearing from the teachers is, you know, it can be a very complex task to break down what's going on in the general ed classroom depending upon the needs of the particular student.
Right.
I also think it's important, we can't say enough that, that all the stuff, all the, I'll call it noise, that's out in the world, particularly on, you know, Facebook around, you know, what is now the new vernacular is the science of reading versus, you know, it's the old reading wars. And Wilton's literacy program is not one or the other. It is a balanced approach to literacy. There is word work, it's deeply embedded, but it's relatively newly embedded. So we haven't, the kids who are now in 5th, 6th, 7th grade did not benefit from this at Miller Driscoll when they were there. So we have some holes to fill for them. But what's happening now, K1 to pre-K, all the way through is different. And there is word work and there is phonics instruction and reader's workshop and writer's workshop is one piece. It's not the whole thing. We use it as if reader's workshop is the whole thing, and that's all of our fault. That's our fault. We have to remember and communicate better to the community that this is a comprehensive literacy approach that takes phonemic and phonological awareness. We teach it. We didn't used to. We do now. There are things
When did
we're
you guys
doing
start teaching
now that, I'm sorry.
When did you guys start teaching it?
It's been in the past couple of years that it's taken a much deeper, it's really started to grow as an approach that's much more integrated into the 90-minute literacy block at the elementary school.
And I will also say that this isn't work that's finished, right? It's ongoing work. We have areas that we need improvement in. And I would say phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary are areas that we recognize that we need to strengthen. And I don't know that we'll ever get to a point where we're perfect. It's a continuous thing. You know, as we develop, we're always going to find areas that we need to grow in. So, but you're right, it is light years better than it was a few years ago.
So, you know, we've got work to do to make sure the community doesn't get caught up in the noise out there. Because it's not all or none. It's not black or white here. And we need to make sure people understand that deeply so that they don't get caught up in the noise. Because there's a lot of noise out there that can drive us in lots of weird directions, and I would hesitate to let that drive this bus. This is important stuff. It's too important to let it be run by Facebook.
Which thankfully I'm not on, but we did get an email from somebody about the science of
We did that
reading.
last week, yeah.
And it's a conversation for us for
I
another
forwarded
day.
that to you.
Not
Yeah,
budget.
I
I just wanted to make sure you guys felt like you had the
Sure.
staff that you need to kind of support that
Absolutely.
group of people.
You know,
We're
I do-
growing the staff that we need to do
Okay.
that.
Perfect.
I do think you're gonna hear a lot about the science of reading, and I have a wonderful article called Nobody Gets to Own the Science of Reading. So I'm gonna share that
You
with
should
you.
share it with us so we can add it to the.
List of things.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else for SPED? That's fine.
I just, in closing this, I have to say, the noise level, you mentioned noise before, has decreased dramatically from what it was 6 or 7 years ago.
Around special education
Around
services.
special education, in terms of quality issues, complaints, et cetera.
Yes, it has.
I think the SEPTA group is supportive. The year I spent with them last year, I think we're we're on the right track and we're doing the right things. And there's no question in my mind that the parents appreciate what we're doing and what you guys are doing. So I just want to make that comment. I think about 5 or 6 years ago, it was not the case at all. It was a tough road, but it has changed dramatically.
That was the number 2
Well
on
done.
my entry plan. Special education.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, to you
We
and the team,
appreciate it.
it's really,
Your support lets us do that. It's good.
well, we got to.
And it's a great fact, the staff in
Yeah.
special education and general, you know,
Yeah.
the staff has been really open.
That's great.
They wanna do what's right for kids,
As
for
do
all
we.
kids. And,
As does the board, I can promise you that.
and we feel that, so your support has been tremendous. We know we can't always do it all in one year.
Yeah.
But, you know, realignment and growth and the support we have had from you has allowed us to do some really good things for kids. And we appreciate that.
So we have just a little bit more time. We're not gonna get through all of our various
Yeah.
budget segments. So I'd like to, if it's okay with everybody, use the remaining minutes we have together and talk about facilities.
Yeah.
Because we have some expanded.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, you take care. Well done, guys. Good luck to
Okay,
you.
while I appreciate and
Yeah.
support your facilities work,
Sorry.
don't, you know, thanks
Does
for coming.
everybody know Jose Figueroa and Chris Burney?
How are you?
I just saw Chris the other day. Chris saved a lunchbox for me.
He's a man of many talents and
Man of
responsibilities.
many talents, yes.
Right.
We have half of the Miller Driscoll Building Committee sitting at this table.
Oh, we do have
Yeah,
that.
we do.
Fair enough. Stephanie, subcommittee. Oh, sure. Great. Is this just one document?
Yeah.
All right, so we can start kind of high level. Chris, can we start with 5-year bonded capital? And can you take us through kind of what we're contemplating this coming school year and then looking at the next several?
Okay, so last year, we started to put out a 5-year plan, and the largest and repetitive item was restoration and replacement repair of roofs in the school district. We had had surveys done with testing which enable us to literally see where there is damp, water-laden insulation in the roofs. And when you have water in the insulation, it doesn't function as insulation, it functions as a transmitter of heat, but it also means that the roof is at some point going to collapse, fail, I should say, and we will have lots of leaks inside. Leaks bring water, water brings all sorts of other problems. So we put it down over 5 years, and my memory is it was $500,000 a year.
I have 6 in 2020 and then 3, 3, and 3
Okay.
rolling out.
So last year, we did close to $400,000, $350,000 of work on the high school roof. We took a lot longer to do it than we hoped. When you walk around and you can see the new white roof. Our plan was that we would do the high school roof. We would then do town hall roof, and the assumption was that the contingency that I was carrying, which was going to be in the $80,000 to $90,000 range, would be the money that was required to restore the canopy at Cider Mill. Because as of last September, we had paved the parking lot, restriped it, all the work that Jose had done inside. So the only thing left to repair was the Cider Mill canopy. The high school project took so long that we couldn't get the town hall roof started. So the town hall roof will start in the spring. Until that's finished and I know what money I've got left, I can't commit to how much restoration will be done on the Cider Mill canopy. When we looked at the details of the canopy, it appears that it was never actually finished being built. There's like a whole layer of the structure missing. And It's always amusing to walk there and look up at the underside and see the spikes that we put up to keep the birds away, and recognize that those are the only areas where the birds are nesting. So we need better lighting, it needs to have better drainage, it needs a waterproof surface. We know there's no lead in the paint, so we can sandblast the structure and recoat it and repaint it.
No structural safety issue though?
No.
Okay,
No.
so this, if, we can afford to wait while the town hall gets
Yeah.
finished? Okay.
I'm absolutely certain there's not a structural issue. We did have an independent assessment done by a company that specializes in building failure analysis, and there was nothing that was, even if there was a hurricane and we had 120-mile-an-hour winds, the top,
Great.
as corroded as it is, that the fasteners would not come off. We also, we looked at the issue of maintaining the elevators and upgrading elevators. Now, by definition, a bondable capital item is greater than $250,000. That's the town standard. The individual elevator work did not meet that standard, and with all of the work that was happening last summer, we did not get to do elevator repairs and replacement. In fact, I have a meeting tomorrow with our elevator company. The elevators at the high school are hydraulic, and they operate no cables, just a shaft that goes inside a tube. That shaft is a single wall tube. Those are no longer acceptable to the state because they can corrode and leak, and that's high pressure hydraulic fluid that would be getting into the building, into the ground, contaminating the subsoil. So we are planning to bring those into code. Whether we do 2 this summer or 1 this summer and 2 next summer will depend a lot on the schedule, on availability of labor. Elevator companies, like everybody else, get real busy when school's out, and there's only a certain amount of resources that we can have. We also have had preliminary discussions, Jose and I and Kevin, about whether we want to be able to keep the high school in service this summer. If we were going to take 2 elevators out of line, it would be hard for people to use certain areas, and the functionality of the high school would be diminished. So I'll have a better idea tomorrow what the money is and what we're going to be doing. As we upgrade the physical capacity of the elevator, we will do a cosmetic upgrade too, so it will look new from the inside. It will function as a new elevator. One of the items on the bonded capital list that I've struggled with is the issue of emergency generators. Brought this up as for discussion at this table last year. I'm having second thoughts about that item.
That's good, because they're not even on this list.
Very proud of that. Was it for next year?
They're not even, I know we talked about, they were on a previous version of this, and I've got the whole, the town proposal, so this is everything. So just what's your current thinking? Are you saying, no, we need?
I think it would be very hard to justify an expenditure of hundreds of thousands of dollars for a contingency that hasn't happened in 50 years. And when I came to this position, I came out of healthcare, where not only are generators expected, they're mandated. So my thinking was a little tainted, developed by that experience.
So you don't want them now?
I would be hard pushed to stand up in a public meeting and say it's a good use of dollars compared to something else that could get done for that money. So I think, I'm changing my opinion, I don't think they're a good investment. You do a risk benefit and you take a look at the history. The situation I'm trying to protect against has never happened in the 50 years the schools have been there.
Better knock on some wood, Grace.
We all did.
Fine.
Yeah.
Thanks, Randy.
Just don't get up in front of everyone and say that.
Yeah. Well, that kind of happened in Ridgefield, which is why I'm more sensitive to it, but I can change my opinion too.
We have limited emergency power at the high school. We have really good emergency power at Miller Driscoll. The way that the buildings are set up, we would have to put in a generator to feed the entire building because it would be incredibly expensive to start to split circuits and rewire the buildings and put in transfer switches. So if you meet the code on an emergency generator, you have to have separate circuits. Or you put everything on and call it emergency. So either you get a really big generator or two big generators, or you spend a fortune on transfer switches, switchgear, and rewiring. And I can look at a lot of other things where we would probably think we would get a better value for spending that much money. I'm more concerned about the air conditioning systems at Cider Mill and Middlebrook, because they do not allow us to effectively dehumidify the buildings. And if you can't dehumidify, then you are creating conditions where you can have mold growth and various damp-related problems. The systems there are antiquated. They are basically 100% fresh air, which is unusual today. Normally you would bring in 20% of your total volume as fresh air. 80% recirculates. That's the standard for an operating room. That's not unusual. So if you're trying to cool and dehumidify 100% of the fresh air, your system by definition has to be 5 times bigger than it should be. So I'm more concerned that for the long run, we would be get a better service. We'd be providing better service and less risk if we could put in much more efficient HVAC systems, and we need to run them all year. You can't turn them off in the summer. I don't know if you've been following what's going on in Stanford, but the history of constantly not running any air conditioning in the summer has been a great surprise to people. And Stanford's now looking at 2 $50 million bond packages just to take care of its schools. And it's all because of mold in the schools. We don't have that issue. I don't want it to get to an issue. So as we approach the end of the useful life of the systems that are there, we need to start designing more efficient systems which will reduce our utility bills, provide better air, better quality. And I'd rather see the money spent there than on generators.
And then Chris, just along those same lines, so on this proposed bonding capital request, flooring replacement was included for 2020 and 2021. My assumption is, based on our conversations last spring with Lynn, that those wouldn't be supported. That's why we folded flooring replacement into our, so I'm assuming we're gonna take that off. And so then the priorities for the district would be the roof replacement and the HVAC. Okay.
And it's HVAC at Cider Mill and Middlebrook?
Yes.
The Miller Driscoll's hopefully fine, and high school's good? Fine.
Miller Driscoll is totally fine.
Right.
We went back the summer after and made some corrections. High school is a lot better than Middlebrook and Cider Mill.
Okay.
Ultimately, it could use some help, but it doesn't cause and provide the same concerns that the other 2 schools do.
Okay. That's bonding. Great. Okay. Jose.
So we all sat down and developed a 5-year plan of what we wanted to do. I think we've been kind of, hitting our marks. We took care of Cider Mill. Got a lot of work done there in that facility. Now we're focusing our attention at Middlebrook. Middlebrook, we're looking to replace carpet and put tile down in the Cheryl and Peterson wing. And the first floor, second floor, classroom corridors.
Is that the red?
Correct.
2-story building?
Yes,
Yeah, is that red
so
and yellow?
that area there will be our focal point this year. And then we're also gonna go down the backside of Middlebrook. There's,
Green.
Is that green? Yes.
Yeah, and we were talking about this the other day, because some board members asked for phase 1 and
Yep.
phase 2, so if you could even take a floor mat and kind of color code it for
Yeah,
us,
do that.
because I think
Absolutely.
part of this phase also included the main atrium and into
the main office, with the
Yeah.
guidance suite.
Okay.
The reason why we did not venture into the historic part of the building, there's a lot of asbestos. So this year, I'm having RFP put together just to see what that cost would be, and then present it to Kevin and the board and see if that's something that we're
The
gonna do.
removal of.
Yeah, removal of, and
For this,
No, for 2022.
2022.
okay.
So phase one would be doing Cheryl and Peterson wing, the main office, the guidance suite, and then the backside of Green. That would be all removed, all the carpet would be removed and put brand new VCT tile down. We
And
also
lighting, like tile, paint, and lighting.
Yeah.
Just like we did at Sun.
Exactly what we did at Cider Mill.
Wow.
The only issue is with the ceiling tiles is gonna be a 2-year plan, and I'll put that together and show you what's gonna be, what that'll look like next year, bless you. So, with the ceiling tiles, we're gonna start on the backside of Middlebrook down by the cafeteria. Take care of all the corridors there, continue all the way down to the historic wing, where you get to the main office where the double doors are. We're gonna replace all the lighting in the corridors, even in the Cheryl and Peterson wing. They have the very narrow 2x4 fixtures. We're gonna put LEDs in there, which is a nice brighter light.
Save money.
Yeah, you save money. Yeah, it's a real nice product. Obviously, we're gonna paint the whole facility. We're gonna start from one end of the building, kind of like what we did at Cider Mill, just to kind of give it a facelift. We also have, I put in to replace and repair the restrooms down by the auditorium. Those 2 restrooms are a mess.
I think
and
I
we-
sent him a picture.
Exactly, so I received pictures from the community and even vendors that are using the space, and it's embarrassing, so I put $100,000 in there just to see. Now, that might not cover a complete revamp because we have to have ADA compliance, so I'm gonna try to work with Chris and the town to see what that looks like to get it up to code, but we're gonna start this year and put some money into those 2 restrooms.
So that's 100,000?
100,000 for the
For both
2 restrooms.
restrooms?
50,000 each is what I budgeted
That's an
for.
estimate, correct?
Estimate, yeah, so we might be able to get 1 restroom completely done for 60, 70, ADA compliance, and then kind of maybe either hold off to the following year to get the other restroom up to where it needs to be.
Is that part of the 250?
No, so the 230 is for the carpet replacement.
So it's 230 plus 100?
Correct.
The total spend at,
I can give
proposed
that
spend
number.
for Middlebrook is 530.
530.
So you have carpet lighting, painting, the bathrooms, ceiling tiles, and then there's a couple of heating units at
Yes,
the
there's,
entryways.
over in the cafeteria area, there's the doors that go out to the courtyards, there's these old univentilators that are
And that's
30s.
phase 1?
Correct.
Phase 1,
Got it.
correct.
They're almost 30 years old and they need to be replaced, so, I got a quote to replace those, so there will be 5 of those that will be replaced. In that 530, it's 230 for the carpeting, 100,000 for the restroom, 60,000 for painting. We have 20,000 for the replacement of the univentilator to heater, 25,000 for the movers, Myers, to come out and help move
Yes, you
the furniture from the library and also from the classrooms, so that we could kind of, focus our attention on doing a cleaning, because that was a huge help over at,
And it all
Yes, I
has to go into operating?
Operating.
None of it can be
Bonded.
bonded?
That was the feedback that we got from the town, and Lynn's concern, and I certainly appreciate it, when you heard her talk about some of it the other night at the tri-board meeting. She was trying to, kind of reduce the debt service line, and the concern today, I believe, is that, we've got the bond from Miller Driscoll, and then we'll be adding the police station.
Police station's gonna be about a $14 million project.
That's all?
Yeah,
I'm surprised. I mean, that's great.
it's taken a lot of time to get there.
I can imagine that's a lot less than I thought it would be.
Right.
Here's, okay.
So, Jose, within the, your total budget, there was about another $500,000 for projects around the district. Can you top line some of those details for
well,
us? Some of major
the
ones?
bigger numbers that you're gonna see is more for contractual services. We have $169,000 of contractual services that we have, and, and that's with ESC, that's with Train. Train is basically a service contract to maintain the high school rooftop equipment. This is the last year of that contract. I have to have a conversation with Mark to see if we're gonna renew it, or is it something that we can take on internally. So there's ESC is just basically support for our building management system. All our control boards, any updates, so Mark has support on that end. That's a $13,000 contract agreement. Security Solutions to monitor our facilities is another $20,000. We have Siemens is around $13,000. We have MJ Daily for life safety to come out and take care of all our smoke detectors, do inspections, quarterly inspections. That's factored into that price. So you'll see that jump of $169,000. One thing that I've done this year, which I didn't factor into, was these are just contract agreements. When we have these vendors come out, there's a bill, there's a cost associated to it. And it's a huge learning curve for me because it's just, I didn't budget for it. So I had to, kind of transfer money around just to cover those costs. So that's where you'll see, again, in some of the buildings I put in, Godfrey Roofing to come out and do roof repairs. We have Security Solution coming out to do any repairs for any doors that we have issues with. If we use a control board, they have to come out and repair that. ESC is another company that we use that monitors all our cameras. We're starting to have cameras that are starting to, not work properly. We have to replace them. Badge readers. So in every building, I budgeted money just so that we could cover those costs in there. The other one is, let's do this real quick.
So those are largely for their site visits?
Correct.
And
Yeah, so if I place a call and we have an issue, a perfect example, everyone says Miller Driscoll is a brand new building and nothing should break. This year, we had to spend quite a bit of money in that facility. We had 2 boards that the warranty ran out, that went bad. It cost us $4,800, and it's something that we had to do. It was the backside of the building, which didn't allow the staff to come in the building. So that was something that, again, I only put $5,000 in Miller Driscoll thinking I'm good because it's a brand new building. We had issues. Mark had a couple little minor issues with rooftop units up there where we had to put Freon into the units. So it's starting to add up, the cost at Miller Driscoll. Nothing to be concerned with. I think the building is great, and it's just the warranty started running out, and now all of a sudden things are starting to break. So I just had to make sure that we have funding available to cover those costs.
Sure. Jose, you have a line, the electrical replacement of ballasts and outlets, and you're kind of projecting $75,000. If we're able to hire an electrician, will that drive that line down?
No, absolutely. That's one thing I think we could have a tremendous amount of savings if we go and hire an electrician. That $75,000, the reason why I increased it $15,000 this year was we've had a lot of electrical needs throughout our buildings. Wilton Electric is one of our contractors that we use. So they come out, we call them, we need a ballast replaced, we need an outlet added. So I kind of factor that in. But we end up cutting $57,000 out of there, so that'll cover the cost if we do decide on hiring an electrician.
Great.
Which would be better for us because we'll get more out of the.
We get full-time usage.
Yeah, we have a vacancy in our maintenance staff, and we're want to
Turn into an
change the position.
electrician? Yes.
We do,
We're
so
working on
we're
that.
gotta do some negotiating with the union, but, Jose has a proposal to make it a Tuesday, Saturday position, which would allow the person to be here in the building, in classrooms when no kids are around, and there's just a lot of upside.
We'll
So
be able to provide a better service for our schools.
Yeah.
And, especially now with the IT department, there's a lot of working with the IT department. There's, network drops, there's adding cameras. We had a couple quotes just come in with work that we want to move forward with, but a lot of it is all loaded with doing the actual work, the labor. So if we hire this electrician, you should see savings in that as well. So, I think that's going to be a huge benefit for our district, so.
But they won't be working on generators.
No.
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, any other just big nuts in the
Just go
budget?
through my,
Yeah, there were a few
Sure.
earlier questions, just it looked like some buildings were up in equipment.
Mhm.
And are there any big equipment purchases, or do you need more something or other.
So right now, it's funny that you mentioned that, because at Middlebrook, as we move forward to replace the carpet and put tile in, we have to have equipment to be able to maintain it. So right now at Middlebrook, there's $25,000 in there to purchase 2 ride-on machines.
Okay.
A
So
smaller
that's-
unit for the
That's what it is.
upstairs, and then a larger unit to maintain the lower level. And it benefits us as well for the gyms as well, because right now we have a real little small unit that we walk behind. So that $25,000 is
Yeah.
something that's well spent. And we did the same thing at Cider Mill. We ended up purchasing two pieces of equipment, which helps maintain the floor.
When we talked initially about changing the carpet to tile, that was one of the absolutes. We had to have the equipment in the green.
Yes.
Yep. It's a shame we can't capitalize, it's $25,000 purchase you think would be capitalized, but I guess not, huh? Phew. Oh, well.
So, I mean, and then if we go to like Cider Mill, I mean, I'm looking to start replacing partitions in the restrooms. In that main area, when you go into Cider Mill, there's the boys and girls restroom. That needs to be taken care of. Also at Cider Mill, we have to replace 4 motors to the basketball hoops, which doesn't adjust the heights. That's something that I was trying to get done this year, but I just don't have the funding to do. So you'll see there's $12,000 for the both restrooms. We also are looking into adding speakers outside the restrooms at Cider Mill. We had a situation where we went into lockdown. It was a scheduled lockdown. There were students that were in the restroom, didn't hear the announcements. So one of the things that, the administration there said, can we kind of at least put some speakers there? So I put $12,000 there. We'll see if that gets completely done, but at least we'll start the process, so. Yeah, I mean, everything else, the cleaning supplies, that's stuff that we just need, it increased a little bit at Cider Mill, it was at $28,000. Now that we put tile in, it's a little bit more cost.
Okay, so that'll explain some of
But
the prior questions that some people
You'll see
had.
that little jump, and I factored that in at Middlebrook as well, anticipating next
That's
year.
gonna go.
So we had to bump that up a little bit, so, the high school kind of stood the same at price-wise for cleaning supplies, but,
Speaking of bathrooms,
Yeah.
there are a couple, or at least one at the high school that people kind of avoid, or it has a bit of a notorious reputation. Is there anything in terms of design, or, I've seen some bathrooms in other public schools, I think I told you this, Kevin, where there are fewer doors and kind of, there's certainly enough corners, but some of the doors the design is different. I mean, you can't redesign it totally, but, just from a newer level of thinking about, how you make them feel more accessible and safer, and they're not so.
Well, we had a renovation done in our restrooms, I want to say 2014.
It hasn't been that long ago, it's been.
Not long ago, but
relatively recent, yeah.
one of the issues that we were faced with at the time was the fieldhouse restrooms are notorious for where staff don't like to use those restrooms because they're so dated, and they just don't have the capacity for what you could hold in the fieldhouse. So those restrooms there need to be looked at. That's something I was thinking about with kind of tying it into Middlebrook's auditorium, because that's gonna need a huge revamp. We have to address the rigging, we have to address the AC there, the restroom, so I was kind of seeing if we could kind of tie that in. There's restrooms up on the 2nd and 3rd floor New Wing that need some TLC, they're 20 years old. This year I'm planning on doing the 2nd floor, and then kind of, keep adding it in, and then eventually we're gonna focus our attention at the high school. Right now we're at Middlebrook, so we're probably a
fair
couple
enough.
years out.
Got it.
And we'll definitely be addressing that.
Right. That is a question that needs to be resolved, is the Middlebrook Auditorium. We had kind of cobbled together, again, a proposal for bonding that would address HVAC in the Middlebrook, the lighting and rigging, the
restrooms.
bathrooms. And, again, I think that the consensus, or the feeling was that there wasn't support in town, there wasn't support for, at least for adding HVAC, and so that project needed to be looked at differently. But that is just as part of our capital
Oh, the
planning.
AC for Middlebrook's auditorium?
Yeah, I wasn't part of that
There is none.
conversation.
There is
Oh, I
need.
know that.
Yeah.
Nothing there, yeah.
There needs to be.
Yeah.
That's the way that space is used. That was an
And I think
unfortunate exclusion. So, but I think this might be work for the business ops committee to do with
Sure.
Chris and Jose, is to just, let's put out a piece of paper what the needs are, cost it out, and then come to some conclusions about how
Are
we
there
pay
any
it.
indoor air quality issues you could tie to Middlebrook's auditorium?
No, I it's just, I don't think it's a
It's
safe
a
place
stuffy
to
one
be
at
in the
top.
beginning of the school year,
Yeah,
at
it's
the
just
end of
plain
the school year,
hot.
having students in there. I mean, I was in there and it's like a sauna. I had
Yeah.
to walk out, I was like, I can't believe the students are in there. But, it's just something that I think we have to get an architect involved and like really look at the structure and come up with a design. And I think there's ways to meet the, you know, the need of the restrooms and the AC. I think it's something that we could definitely get done and tie in the restrooms at the high school with that kind of.
Yeah, the AC would be easy enough to do, it won't be pretty.
I think you could really, it would be.
The rest of that building.
Huh?
I'd like to make it pretty.
I think if you're familiar with Middlebrook where the bus loop is, there's that wasted
Yeah.
space in the front. You
Yeah.
blow that out, put the restrooms there, put the unit on top, kind of make it blend in and then punch a hole through, but that's, an architect could design it better. But I mean, there's a solution. I mean, we were talking about it, they were talking about taking up space in the restroom to put the units there. But those two restrooms that are there are good for the staff that, in that area, so. But it's something that definitely an architect will have to weigh in and come up with a plan, but it's something that we have to do.
Questions?
Yeah,
All right, well,
I'm-
we've kept you longer than we
Yeah.
should have, so thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I would say that we have all the confidence in the world in this guy.
Absolutely.
If you would all like to end with some positive good news, then you give me 2 minutes.
Of course.
Yes, go, let's hear solar.
Yeah.
You got turned on?
No, it's being done today.
Is that, oh, we're a day behind still? Okay.
So I'm gonna run real quick through the utilities.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did not mean to cut you off, I had just thought that you were doing it.
No,
Sorry,
we
I'm so
appreciate
sorry.
the opportunity to leave earlier.
I'm so sorry, I thought it, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, there we go.
So what you're looking at is a solar field in Middletown, Connecticut. That is over 10 acres of solar panels. That is larger than 8 football fields put together.
Yeah.
It is a 2 megawatt system, and the town has been working with the town of Weston and a third-party developer. That system's going live this week, and we will be the recipient of about 90% of the power.
How did the town of how did Middletown agree to this, or?
They had
the
land
develop-
that they sold, the company bought land, got a permit, and did it.
Oh,
There's changes in the Connecticut state law which has allowed this to happen in the last year. So the way this works, we designate which buildings receive power. The first 3 buildings will be the high school, Cider Mill, and Middlebrook. Our estimated savings in the first year are about $100,000. If we look at the 25-year life of the contract, and we have no increases in utility bills, it's $1.8 million that we save. And if we put a 2% inflation factor in, we save $3.7 million over 25 years as a town. Because there are more accounts coming online, which will be for the Comstock Community Center. Town Hall, when the police department gets renovated, we'll add that in. And
But 100,000 for the 3 buildings, the
Yeah.
3 schools,
yeah.
So
year to
you-
year?
we're talking, yeah, I was
Yes,
gonna say.
in the
count-
first full year.
Yeah.
Now, the numbers are
For
approximate.
next year then?
Yes.
So we put that in?
We held,
I have a
we
small
held our,
fraction, I don't have, right.
We didn't increase the accounts.
Right.
The numbers that are in the budget will require some fine tuning, but we did not.
We didn't project it in
Right.
next year's budget.
Right, we didn't
So
go
it's
with
not in
an
here yet?
increase, and we went with a small decrease, I
Yeah.
didn't know that it was gonna be
Yeah.
to that
So-
size.
And until we get experience, I'd probably,
Yeah.
it's
All
the
right,
prudent thing to do.
I erred on the side
Yeah.
of caution.
Exactly.
so we should see, I mean, we should see if this thing does go live this week, then as we move through this spring, we ought to start to see savings in our electricity line. That's great.
So we should be able to get a handle or some indication of what it may be before the next year starts, the next fiscal year starts, and that's would be the
Yeah,
hope.
fair enough.
So we have the solar systems on Miller Driscoll and Middlebrook. They are performing a little better than expected. Our annual savings from those 2 systems are about $70,000. And we've seen that in the history over the last couple of years. Talk briefly about heating gas. Miller Driscoll, when it was rebuilt, was converted to a gas system. part of the cost of it, putting the pipe up Wolf Pit was paid by the town as part of the project, and part was paid by the Board of Ed via a $25,000 a year subsidy or payment to Eversource. Going into the new budget year, that payment's finished, so you have a $25,000 decrease in gas costs theoretically. So we saw no reason to increase the actual cost of the gas because that expense line has gone away. So I thought that was good news. Bus fuel, diesel, our contract expires on June 30. So I really don't know what our bus fuel budget's gonna be next year. But I can tell you that as of this morning, diesel fuel was 2 cents a gallon less than it was this time last year. So unless there's some global uprising, national disaster, I think it's reasonable to say that we can lock in a contract for fuel oil for the buses and keep the costs the same, no increase.
You're gonna let it ride for a while?
Yeah. And then the other one I just want to mention briefly is refuse, trash. The town's contract with city carding expired last June 30. We've been on a month-to-month since. I think we've absorbed all of the major increases. The Board of Ed's contract expires this June 30. The Board of Ed has a different process. And at the board, we pay for pickups. We tell them we want you to pick up this container every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, whatever it is. We don't have a weight process, we just pay for pickups. Heather Priest has been working really well with Tammy Thornton. And we've made some changes to our pickup schedule, but we're also in the midst of a study with the town of Weston, independent consultant, and WestCog, the Western Connecticut Council of Governments, to see if there are better ways to get rid of our trash, to reduce the trash stream and get rid of it. One of the reasons that we have routine pickups of dumpsters in schools is there's food in there, and we don't want them sitting around in the summer when the flies are there. I don't know if you've talked to Heather recently, Heather Priest, but her food composting program is taking 2,000 pounds of waste food out of each school every month. It's an amazing program.
It really is incredible.
So the whole process with refuse and trash is to minimize what you put out and then find a better way to get rid of it. There's a statewide program in place. We met with the consultants this week. Every one of the trash to energy plants in this state is in danger of closing in the next 10 years. That's thousands of lorries every week going to Pennsylvania or Rhode Island. And we can't do that with the
Why are they
volume of
closing?
trash.
What's the driver?
They're beyond the natural, useful life. They are deteriorated. The one in Hartford was closed for a year last year. The newest one is in the town of Preston, and I worked on that one in 1990. And that's the new one.
It's 30 or so.
It's a scary thought when you look at all of the stuff that we throw out. So the town is looking at options as to how to reduce its waste stream. Obviously, since I sit on both sides of that fence, we're trying to coordinate the Board of Ed needs and expenses with the town's needs and expenses. The whole recyclable problem which hit last year, we used to get paid $20 a ton. Now we pay $85 a ton. Well, that's going to have an impact on the schools when the contract is up for renewal. And there is still money in good, clean, recyclable product like cardboard. And the custodians do a really good job of separating and flattening out the cardboard and getting rid of it. But we just have to find a way to get less trash out and then deal with it in a better way. I think that was, the differential between trash and recyclable is now $10 to $15 a ton. It used to be $100 a ton. So we're looking at this from a long-term point of view. I think we can hold the line on the budget for next year no matter what happens. Whether we have a solution until this time next year may be a different story.
I think somebody with some brains could step into this and figure out, as as an opportunity to do something. I would think,
Monitor it,
I'm not
absolutely.
me,
Yeah.
but I would think somebody would see what's going on as an opportunity to really figure out how to do something and make it work for them.
Well, a lot of our hazardous waste goes to Woonsocket, Rhode Island, and they're closing that though,
Hmm.
which is gonna increase our disposal costs for
Yeah.
asbestos and PCBs.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay.
I thought you were gonna end on a good note.
Solar.
Hey,
Hey,
in
solar.
my world, this is all good.
You did, solar, okay?
Thank
Solar
you for your
performance
time.
is right on target,
Yeah.
particularly for Middlebrook, and in fact, it's slightly better than what
No, it's
we
great,
had
no, it's
anticipated.
wonderful,
Yeah.
of course it is.
That
We
is good
are
news.
almost
Yeah.
at the town stated goal is that we will be better than 70% of all our electricity will be generated by renewable resource. We are almost there. We will be
Yeah.
there this time next year.
Yep.
Yeah, that's incredible.
All right.
Right. All right, Chris, thank you.
Thank you.
Jose, just work your magic at Middlebrook like you did at Cider Hill, okay? You can do it.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess we are now adjourned.
7 o'clock tonight or 7:30?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock, okay. Got it.
Thanks, it's really good to see you.
I
Thank you.
might as well, I have to create the